I'm a descendant of Walminyaru people, the Broome area in the Kimberley. My mother's side, my mother was born and grew up in Derby. My grandmother moved to Derby from Broome, and her grandmother was from Broome, and previous generations were from the Broome area. Mum and Dad moved from Derby down into Perth, and that's where I was born and grew up in Perth. So we lost that connection with Indigenous culture, and for a long period of time, until I was 13 years old, I didn't know that part of my history. So there was no association with being urban Aboriginal, which that's my work starts to look at that now, what that means and what our stories are, bring those stories forward. Because what I had learned at school about Aboriginal people was about the noble savage, about sort of desert dwellers, the humpy standing on one leg holding a spear as that very iconic early Australian colonisers' history about Indigenous people. Also what was in the media at the time, which was usually negative about the Indigenous population. My original intention coming into CAIA was family research, with the art making and practice as not my focus, I suppose. Although as soon as I started in CAIA, it was, I got a huge amount, I suppose, satisfaction out of that process of being able to research something and then express it in another way. I'm not the best person with words, and I found this forum of researching and actually putting forward what I'm finding and explaining things further within a three-dimensional context was so much more powerful than the words that I could use. And I'm starting to see those words now as part of the colonisation process anyway. There's sort of, for me, that word text and English language is a colonising binary that had been put onto Indigenous people, which has taken a lot away. So going back to being able to make art sort of almost navigates around that and becomes something that's a visceral experience. It comes back to colonisation and colonisation technologies, and utilising those colonising technologies the way I want to use them as opposed to the way they were being used. It was almost subverting those technologies and making them my own, to actually give back rather than consume. Possibly All the Family Landscape series basically started within an exhibition that I did at the Whole Gallery early last year, in 2014, produced partly by a palimpsest or erasure machine that I made in my honours year in 2013. It was originally, I had the idea of looking at the educational system and what I was taught, and utilising a blackboard and being able to actually take off what was on a blackboard. And the machine developed from being something simple into the current format that the machine exists in now. And it comes from 3D printing technology, which I've changed and made my own. So I'm using an X and Y axis to be able to plot or to erase in any area within that, and being able to program and control that fairly precisely. When we talk about printing machines and 3D printing machines or anything like that, even your desktop printer, it's an additive process. And that, to me, that additive process within that printing is like histories and things where it's adding over our history. So I started looking at that additive process, and it was through the playing with the blackboard. It was one of those moments where you're using a rubber, and then I got out a squirty bottle one day and just squirted it. And that moment, it was sort of one of those serendipitous moments, and you go, okay, yep, got it. So I was actually then trying to work out within the machine how I spray it with water or be able to control that. It's getting parts and bits from here and there, so I sort of, some areas for through the technology I rely on forums for 3D printers and some other areas. I go to, like this came out of a car forum, which I don't usually hang around on, but I found out fuel injectors was something that I could control a small amount of water precisely, and being able to use it with the machine, I sort of then attached a driver for it, which is just controlling the voltage. And then it was a handheld version at the first before I made the other one. I've got still a video of me with it on the chalkboard, which that's how it started, with the chalkboard, just erasing the surface. That was just one area which I sort of had a good outcome, I think. The second part of it was the build-up of the chalk, which was initially just going to be a chalkboard with a bit of chalk and rubbing it on. So you had that thin layer of chalk over the surface and then squirting it off. But when I tried it at home, when I was actually intrigued with my experiments on that, using that method, the residue, the water that was actually dripping down and landing on the ground, and I didn't notice until the next day, but it was leaving its own marks on there. Also, there was, I suppose, I wasn't getting the definition I wanted, so that I modified my spray gun to be able to take the chalk. I found I was able to get layers, just thin layers, and keep putting them on a surface. Sort of ground up some ochre and mortar and pestle sort of thing, and starting to look at the sciencey in the old studio, and applied that and used that, and that gave me a wonderful result as it sort of bled down the surface and collected on the bottom. It was sort of it was a sort of a wonderful image of this thing, and then going back to the black underneath. The residues actually sort of, within my work, sort of leave a stain as well. They're hard to get rid of it. So to examining these residues actually give you a lot of the story. That's what's happened. It's not just the erasure, it's what's left over from it, all the residues from the process of colonisation too. This is where I I suppose, departed from the blackboard as such, although these still have the black board underneath. I was actually building up the layers of ochre, and then I tried white chalk over the top of it. I ended up finding another source of calcium carbonate, which is what I use for the chalk, which is just ground up limestone, really fine. I was able to apply that to the ochre, and you wouldn't get the bleed through, so to give you a great surface. It was almost, if I painted it on a wall, it almost disappeared, so it became part of the surface as well. That was a sort of a major, both process and conceptual breakthrough, because really my concept of this being able to uncover histories, this idea of a white canvas, I suppose, or a white wall, or whatever I was applying to, being able to erase the surface and expose what was behind it, fitted in really nicely conceptually. I was trying to use the machine to actually, with the erasure process, to actually bring out images of my grandmother and my great-grandmother. The way it bleeds down through, from the top down through the other spaces, so you're actually covering up some of the detail that was happening before, so it's really hard to get that image. And I can still see the image of Mimi in this one and the other images that I've done, but sort of stepping back from it, after I'd done one or two of them, and I tried to build up white chalk back over and build it up and try to get some depth within it. They still look like landscapes. They became landscapes. So there was a moment in the studio where it was that idea of, okay, if you want to be a landscape. As soon as I started seeing it as a landscape, it changed completely for me as the image, and where I was unhappy before with what I was producing. It's a very strong moment of realisation that as much as I'm trying to recreate them, it's coming back to country again. And as an importance of the work, it needed to be back to country. This one When I was doing the landscape didn't work out. I had a problem with the surface that I didn't like. A little bit particular about having the contrast and having sort of fairly even surfaces. So one day I just got a spray gun full of water out, proceeded to spray all the white off it, white chalk off it, and then started to rub it off as well, and then it was halfway through it that I realised I was actually creating something else rather than I was going to reuse the board, reapply it. And it became, the landscape actually became a stronger element. It actually popped out as opposed to, it was there before, but then it lost all the white and it gained a depth to it that I hadn't seen before or I hadn't even thought about before. So it stood there in the studio space by itself for a while, and then these other works I had seen somewhere else, and they just married together so well. And it's an intensity with they brought out the other elements with that, and they almost became coastal landscapes. The Broome area is the tidal flats and the creeks and things. You walk along there and you're getting all these different things happening where the water comes in and out, and you get these little rivulets happening that are sort of on a micro level and also on a macro level. If you had, and I saw these aerial photographs, they're really indicative of what happens here. Once again, it's sort of these moments of chance that happen within the studio space that I think at the moment I tend to rely on to actually take the next step further with these works. Earlier on, my mistakes were usually filled with shame because I wasn't able to do exactly what I was able to set out to do. And through these processes, even last week there was a mistake that happened there, and now it's leading on to another work where the surface that I built up was put into an environment that I never put it into, which was hot and dry, really hot and dry. And it did something that they actually caught on security camera that I'm now wanting to use in the next process. As much as I dislike the little bit of agony that goes with the fear of failure, but it's these acts of failure sometimes that bring forward new opportunities and new ways of seeing. I don't want to lose that way, but I don't know, it's not something you can channel in a way where you can work on it. It's not a procedure that you take, it's just being in tune with that enough to see it as for what it is, take from it. It's almost cataloguing all these mistakes and failures through the process of learning something that then become useful somewhere else. What I've seen through just visiting my auntie back in country, I've learned a lot more of the protocols, I've learned a lot more about culture, so I was a lot more informed to go back there rather than just going back without these learnings. And I still green, I asked Auntie if I could interview her, and I had a list of questions that I wanted to go through, and I sort of booked in a time with her, and then we had all the text on my page written out and the microphone and everything ready to interview her. She seemed to be a little bit nervous about that. Yeah, I felt like she thought it was more of an interrogation as opposed to an interview. Went to bring it up and she goes, "Let's go fishing." I said, "Oh, yeah, okay." Arnie's fishing trips are like a few days. They're not just you go down the beach and do some fishing. So I was quite keen to do that. And it was almost using those colonisers' methodologies of information gathering. It was almost like an anthropologist, early anthropologist, of sitting down and asking questions and documenting it, taking it away, processing it. But she gave it things that were important, and I got far more out of that. I still come back to that idea of there's a whole lot of senses happening there. There's a smell of an area, there's a sort of feel underfoot, there's a temperature, there's what you're seeing and what you're taking in. It's a huge amount, but it becomes that experience. It's an experience rather than a solid bit of text that you remember what that word or what that phrase is. It's something that is attached to so many different areas that it becomes part of you rather than an overlay. I suppose that's what work comes back, is that sort of, that's an overlay on this deeper knowledge, or this deeper way of learning. I suppose my indigeneity, that's what I'm trying to bring out within my work, and why that was denied and why it still is denied. So I'm bringing these histories of my grandmother forward so I can actually place myself and understand what they went through, and understand why that wasn't passed on in some aspects, and understand where I fit within in Indigenous communities. And it's one of those things that it's full of conflict for me, because I have this other education and I have this other knowledge that it's almost like, I struggle with that. It's not my world-changing struggle that there's horrible things, but it's sort of this identity struggle that happens when you exist in one world and you have a really strong connection in another. It's hard. I'm still trying to put this together, and I think part of my work is that idea of that exploration.